Hi, I'm here with Steve Allen from Deeside Against Pylons Action Group. We're here today to discuss the proposals of SSEN. Really grateful for Steve to turn up. Steve is one of the officers involved in that action group. It builds on a couple of meetings that we've had in Dromoke and elsewhere, and we're at the final stages now. I think tomorrow is the last day of the SSEN consultation, Steve. And we've got a motion coming up also at Holyrood from Tess White. What are you seeing at the moment in terms of where the action group is in relation to the issue, Steve?
I think the action group is firing on all four cylinders now. I think we've come from a point where we were a number of disparate groups looking at different parts of the line, and we're now working much more closely together, trying to coordinate activity so that we take the whole project in as a system rather than just a kind of local issue.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, because the way I see it, and I think that you're looking to recruit in this respect, because it isn't just the sort of local issue, it's the cumulative impact of one stage after another stage, isn't it, in relation to the whole system. So the whole process and the whole impact as it builds on one location to another location, that's a good approach, isn't it?
Well, I think one of the things that we're focusing on is realising that whilst this is one project, the line from Kintore to Teeling and the substations that go with it is essentially one project by SSEN. But because of the vagaries of the planning process and the planning legislation, they've been able to split this into a number of different planning applications. Now, the consequence of that is it makes it very difficult for communities to focus their opposition, because resources are split, the timelines are different, the planning authorities are either the local authority or the government. And so one of the things that we're looking at is how to advance the argument that this should all be dealt with as one single project, a position which seems to be supported by Scotland's Chief Planning Officer, who has written that substations and ancillary infrastructure are in fact all part of the development of an overhead line.
Building on that really important point, Steve, I've got a meeting coming up with SSEN very shortly, and one of the things that I'm focusing on in that meeting is the environmental impact assessment. And I think that one of the things that came out of the meetings in Dromoke is the necessity that we work with SSEN and with groups like your own around the scope and the remit regarding the environmental impact assessment. This is going to be key, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that whilst we clearly and strongly oppose SSEN's plans, that's not the same as saying that we don't want to work with you. I mean, we're huge supporters of the Scottish approach to government, assets-based, participatory, really engage communities in co-production of some of these solutions to these strategic problems. And, our message to SSEN is, start again, come and talk to us, work with us, and I'm sure that together we can design something that meets your needs, meets the needs of Scotland and the wider UK, but also crucially meets the needs of Scotland's rural communities.
Yeah, I think there needs to be an element of refresh here, because certainly, irrespective of whether you're in favour or against, impartial or in whole, or whatever the reasons and arguments are, there's a premise behind what's going on here. And certainly the early stages regarding the Westminster engagement, which I don't think has been open, transparent at all. But I certainly will be listening to the views of SSEN as I'm listening to the views of action groups. Anything you want to finish on here, Steve?
No, just to reiterate the point that this is about Scotland's communities wanting to work with Scotland's decision makers to come up with a solution that works for all of us. It must be out there, and the current reliance on 20th century technology to solve a 21st century challenge just seems bizarre and seems not worthy of the kind of country that we all want to be and to live in and bring our children up in.
Yeah, and I think on that, everyone's in favour. I mean, generally I think people absolutely get the targets in terms of meeting net zero. How we do that and how we do that incorporating the views of communities is absolutely essential. And I think, as Steve absolutely rightly says, we need to get this right, because this doesn't just relate to what SSEN are doing. It relates to so many other activities which are impacting on our energy targets at the moment, whether that's climate change, whether it's electricity and infrastructure and so forth. So I think Steve is absolutely right that this is at the beginning of a journey which the UK and Scotland has to take forward. Thanks very much, Steve.
You're welcome.